The first time I saw him, he was standing barefoot in the kitchen, wearing a faded gray t-shirt and stirring coffee like he owned the place. He didn't notice me at first. I stood there, suitcase in hand, half expecting the wrong door to swing shut in my face. Instead, he looked up and smiled, easy, confident, like I hadn't just caught him mid-morning ritual in my new apartment. "You must be Rayan," he said, offering his hand with casual warmth. "I'm Arman. Welcome." His handshake was firm, brief, and laced with an ease I envied. The apartment was a 2-bedroom unit in the quieter corner of the city, close to campus but far enough to muffle its chaos. Clean, minimalist, with an aroma of freshly brewed coffee and worn books. It felt more like his home than ours. I nodded and mumbled something about the train delay. He showed me around with the kind of smooth efficiency that came from already having done this with someone else. That thought lingered longer than I liked. The first week passed in polite small talk and quiet evenings. We were two people learning to share space without stepping on each other's rhythm. He cooked, I cleaned, he played music while studying, I wore noise-canceling headphones. There were no confrontations, only an unspoken arrangement that worked. But Arman had a way of filling space even in silence. He had that kind of presence, gentle, observant, effortless. He remembered how I took my tea. He noticed when I stayed up late staring blankly at my laptop. He even paused his music one evening and asked, "You okay?" I wasn't sure how to answer. "Just tired," I lied. He nodded like he understood more than I'd said. Over the next few weeks, the distance between us shrank in inches. Movie nights began with 2 separate blankets and ended with shared popcorn bowls and laughter. He'd tell me stories from his childhood, how he broke his arm jumping off a mango tree, how his mother cried at every school play, even when he was just a tree in the background. I listened, memorized, and slowly got pulled into his orbit. And somewhere between those nights and the casual elbow nudges in the kitchen, I realized something was shifting. I started looking for him in the mornings. I timed my showers so we'd cross paths. I laughed a little harder at his jokes. And one night, when we brushed shoulders while reaching for the remote, I didn't pull away. Neither did he. But I told myself I was imagining it, because I had. 2. Then came the phone call. It was a late Tuesday night. I was returning from the laundromat, hands full of damp clothes and a head full of exhaustion. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft murmur of Arman's voice from his room. His door was ajar, and I paused just long enough to hear it. "I miss you too," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard. "Just a few more months, I promise. I'm figuring it out." A pause. A sigh. Then, "I love you." I froze. The weight of the laundry in my arms suddenly matched the heaviness in my chest. I didn't wait to hear more. I walked to my room, shut the door, and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a carousel of confusion and denial. Who had he been talking to? A girlfriend? A long-distance partner? I hadn't asked, and he hadn't told. Maybe I'd never had the right to wonder. The next morning, he was back in the kitchen, barefoot and stirring coffee. "Laundry went okay?" he asked, smiling like everything was normal. "Yeah," I said. "No missing socks this time." "Sorry," laughed. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the silence that stretched between our words. I caught myself watching him more carefully, every glance, every smile, every time he looked at his phone and smirked to himself. I wanted to ask him. I wanted the truth. But fear is a quiet monster. It makes you delay, doubt, and eventually, detach. One evening, as we sat side by side watching a film neither of us cared about, he nudged my knee with his. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I'm always quiet," I replied. He looked at me then, really looked, not just, with curiosity but with a softness that made it hard to breathe. "I like your quiet," he said. And for a moment I believed him. For a moment I let myself imagine that the space between us wasn't full of secrets. I didn't know then how wrong I was. The days blurred into each other after that night. The air between us felt different, charged, cautious. Arman still moved around the apartment with the same grace, the same ease, but I noticed the flickers of restraint in him now. He laughed, but it didn't linger. He spoke, but measured. It was as if both of us were pretending that we hadn't crossed an invisible line. But that line didn't stay invisible for long. One rainy Friday evening, the power went out. The storm outside rattled the windows, and the room filled with the warm glow of a single candle. Arman and I sat in the living room, backs against the couch, sharing instant noodles from a single bowl. The storm outside was loud, but the silence between us was louder. "I used to be terrified of thunder," I said, trying to break it. He glanced at me. "Still are?" "Maybe." He leaned his head back, eyes on the ceiling. "You don't seem scared of much." "You don't know me that well." He didn't respond right away. Then, softly, "I know enough." I looked at him. His face was half lit by candlelight, and for a second, he didn't look like a roommate. Or even a friend. He looked like a question I didn't know how to answer. That night, we fell asleep on the couch. Our shoulders touched and neither of us moved away. After that, things got tangled. Arman became more attentive. He started waiting for me before dinner. He'd knock on my door just to ask if I wanted to take a walk. He began texting me during the day, memes, random thoughts, even pictures of his lunch. He didn't explain why, and I didn't ask. I let myself believe this meant something. But with every step forward, there was a pull back. There were still those phone calls, hushed and private. Once, I passed by his door just as he said, "I'm trying to figure things out. Please just trust me." That trust wasn't mine, I reminded myself, but it felt like it was. One evening, as we sat watching an old film, he turned to me suddenly. You think it's possible to love two people at once?" he asked. The question hit harder than I expected. I shrugged, playing it off. "I think it's possible to be confused." He gave a tight smile. "Yeah, that makes sense." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press him, but the answer hung between us, like the unfinished sentence we both refused to say. Then, everything tilted. We were at a friend's gathering, the kind where half the people don't know each other, but everyone acts like they've been lifelong companions. Arman introduced me as his guy, not in a romantic way, more like a possession. I didn't know whether to be flattered or ashamed. Later that night, as we walked home under flickering streetlights, I asked, "Why'd you say that? That I was your guy?" He stopped walking. "Because you are." I turned to him, heart racing. "But not really, right?" His silence stretched like an echo. Then he said, "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "This. You and me. It's not supposed to happen. I'm not supposed to feel this." "You're engaged," I said. "It came out harsher than I meant." He nodded, almost as if he expected me to bring it up. "It was arranged a year ago. My parents, our families, there's a lot tied into it. I didn't think I'd ever meet someone who'd make me question it." I swallowed hard. "And now?" He stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Now I wake up and you're the first person I think about. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." "But you're still going through with it?" "I have to." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the weight of it all cracked something in me. "So what do you expect from me, Arman? To just wait here while you play both sides?" "No, I don't expect anything," he said, voice raw, "but I can't let you go either." That night, I didn't sleep in my room. I stayed up on the couch, staring at the ceiling again. Not from wonder this time, but from a heaviness I couldn't shake. I had let my feelings grow roots in a place where they could never bloom. The next morning, Arman acted as if the conversation had never happened. He made coffee, offered toast, even played music while he worked on his laptop, as if nothing between us had changed. But everything had. I watched him move through the apartment like a man standing on two different cliffs, refusing to choose which one to fall from. And I realized then, the central conflict wasn't just between him and his fiancée. It was between him and the truth. And I was the consequence caught in the middle. Would I let myself become someone's secret? Or would I finally step out from behind the silence? I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. But I knew the question would return. It always did. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope strung between reality and illusion. Arman and I moved around each other with forced normalcy. We still shared dinners, exchanged jokes, even watched a few episodes of our favorite show. But underneath every casual glance and every unfinished sentence was the truth we refused to name. We were entangled in something fragile, forbidden, and already cracking at the seams. One evening, he lingered in the kitchen long after the dishes were done. I stood by the window, sipping tea, watching rain trace soft lines down the glass. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. "I'm going home next weekend," he said, breaking the silence. I didn't look at him. "For how long?" "A week, maybe more." I nodded, pretending the answer didn't. Tightened my chest. "She wants to meet again. Her parents do too." "So you're really going through with it?" He exhaled, slow and deliberate. "I don't see another way." That was the first moment I realized I was waiting for him to choose me, and that he never would. He took a step closer. "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "For lying to me? Or for letting me believe this was something real?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was confirmation enough. That night, I packed a small bag and left. I didn't tell him where I was going. I just needed space, away from the tangled mess of feelings, away from the hope that refused to die no matter how many times it was abandoned. I stayed with an old friend, someone who didn't ask too many questions and offered me a couch and quiet company. I turned off my phone, stopped checking messages, stopped waiting. But distance doesn't always dull emotion. Sometimes it sharpens it. In that silence, I thought about everything. Every moment. Arman and I had shared every smile, every stolen glance, every confession disguised as casual conversation. And I realized I had fallen in love with someone who didn't know how to be honest, not even with himself. 3 days later, he showed up. I was sitting on the porch when I saw him walking up the steps, soaked in rain, hair plastered to his forehead, and eyes that held something fragile. "You left," he said. "You made it easy." He didn't laugh, he didn't even smile. "I've been losing my mind." I stood, folding my arms. "Why are you here?" "Because I need to say this, and I can't if you keep running." "I'm not the one running," I snapped. "I've been here, waiting, while you juggle two lives like one won't collapse." His jaw clenched. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did. Every time you made me feel like I mattered, then reminded me I didn't." "I never said you didn't matter. You didn't have to. Your choices said it for you." He stepped closer. "I love you." The words hung in the air, trembling. But they didn't land the way he expected. They didn't fix anything. They came too late, too tangled in what had already broken. "You love the version of me that doesn't ask for anything," I said, quietly. "You love the idea of us, but not enough to choose it." His shoulders dropped. He looked down like he already knew I was right. He began. "No." I interrupted. You don't get to just show up and say you love me like that erases everything. I needed you when it mattered, and you chose silence. The rain had soaked through both of us, but neither of us moved. I thought I could live 2 lives, he said finally. One for them, one for me. But all I've done is destroy both. There it was, the truth he'd been choking on since the beginning. And maybe that was what I needed to hear, not because it offered closure, but because it proved he was human, flawed, afraid, and not ready. I'm going back, he said after a long pause, but not to marry her, not to pretend anymore. I'm going to tell them the truth. I stared at him, unsure whether to believe it or brace for disappointment. He stepped back slowly. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't live in that lie anymore. I'm sorry it took losing you to realize that. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the rain with nothing but the echo of what he'd said. I didn't call after him. I didn't ask him to stay, but something inside me shifted. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without weight on my chest, because maybe, just maybe, the person I loved was finally learning to become the man I needed him to be. Still, I wasn't waiting. Not anymore. Weeks passed. The seasons began to shift, and so did I. Life found a rhythm again, though not the same one. I moved back into the apartment, not because of Arman, but because it was mine too. The place felt quieter now, emptier, though nothing had physically changed. The couch still creaked the same. The sunlight still poured through the kitchen window in the mornings. But the absence of something once so tangled had left a visible imprint on every surface. Arman hadn't returned yet. After that night in the rain, he'd vanished into the silence he used to hide behind. But this time it felt different. He wasn't hiding out of fear. He was confronting what he'd been running from. I didn't know what that would look like or if it would bring him back to me. I just knew I wasn't holding my breath. Then one evening, I received a message. Home tomorrow. Can I see you? I stared at it for a long time, letting the words settle before I answered. Yes, but I'm not the same person you left. When he arrived, he didn't bring grand speeches or flowers or empty promises. He stood at the door like a man who'd walked through a storm and left pieces of himself behind. There was a tiredness in his eyes, but also clarity, like he'd finally stopped running from the mirror. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same one where we used to share meals and inside jokes. This time, no words were dressed in pretense. I told them, he said. I nodded, waiting. They didn't take it well. My parents, they feel like I've embarrassed them. Her family is furious. And you? I asked. I feel free. Terrified, but free. He looked up at me. Really looked. I don't expect you to forgive me, or to pick up where we left off. But I needed you to know. I chose the truth. Finally. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the weight of his journey in. The way he held his shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly. This wasn't the boy who once wanted 2 lives. This was a man who'd lost almost everything to live as one. I didn't wait for you, I said honestly. I couldn't. I know. But I missed you. A flicker of emotion crossed his face. I missed you every day. There wasn't a perfect reunion. No cinematic kiss or sweeping embrace. Just 2 people who had been broken in different ways, quietly reaching across the wreckage to see what could still be rebuilt. We started slowly. Conversations became regular again, this time unfiltered. There were still hard moments, times when I flinched at memories, nights when he'd retreat into silence, unsure of how much of himself he was allowed to share. But we were learning each other again, not as the people we pretended to be, but as who we truly were. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore, and I wasn't trying to fix him. One afternoon, as we folded laundry together, a mundane, ordinary task, he looked over and said, Do you ever think about that night the power went out? I smiled. All the time. Me too. It felt like something started that night. It did, and it almost ended us too. He reached out, brushing his fingers against mine. But we're still here. Are we? I asked softly, not accusing, just searching. He held my gaze. I hope so. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. The central conflict between us had never been just about love. It was about truth, about courage, about whether love could survive the lies we tell ourselves when we're afraid to want more than what the world offers us. In Arman, I had once seen someone who made me feel chosen, only to be reminded that I was always second. But now, for the first time, I saw someone who chose himself first, and in doing so, left room to choose me too. We weren't perfect. We were messy, uncertain, scarred, but we were honest. And maybe that was the most radical kind of love there is, the kind that stands not on illusion, but on vulnerability. As the sun dipped below the skyline that evening, casting golden light through the window, I realized something simple yet profound. He hadn't just been my roommate. He had become the mirror that made me see myself clearer. He had been the mistake, the heartbreak, the hope, and now, maybe, the beginning. And whether or not we lasted, we had finally arrived at something real, not a secret, not a substitute, but a love that was ours. Unapologetic, unhidden, and at last, fully true.